can't walk anymore?
The little boy whispered, "Mama can't walk anymore." The cowboy carried them both into his cabin. Late afternoon, outskirts of a snow-draped frontier town. Winter, 1887. Snow dusted the winding dirt road, where earth met sky in a dull blur of gray and white. The sun had begun to dip, casting long shadows across the frozen path that led away from the main stretch of town. Along that road trudged a woman and a boy, heads bowed not just from wind, but from something heavier. Nell Hawthorne, not yet 30, bore the weight of a heavy flour sack across her back. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, damp from breath and snow. Every step was deliberate, careful. Her boots left staggered imprints, one slightly deeper than the other. Beside her walked her son, Caleb. He was 5, maybe a little older, the kind of child who had learned early that silence was safer. His mittens were worn, and his coat too thin. He kept close, glancing up at her every few steps, eyes wide beneath the brim of his knit cap. He reached up once to touch the flour strap slipping from her shoulder. She shook her head gently, as if to say, "Let Mama carry this, I'm fine." But she was not. Nell's left foot had begun to betray her. It slipped slightly each time it hit the snow-packed road. She bit her lip, said nothing. Her breath was shallow and too quick. Her hands gripped the sack tighter, not to lift it better, but to hide the tremble. Caleb watched everything. He said nothing, but his steps edged closer. Then, finally, he stopped. "Mama, does your leg hurt?" Nell forced a smile, faint and brittle. "No, love. Just tired is all." He frowned. Then, without asking, he knelt on the snowy road and began pressing his small hands against her ankle. Clumsy, but careful. "Let me rub it," he whispered, "so it stops hurting." Nell placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression cracking. She closed her eyes. He knew there was no more hiding it. They continued, slower now. A narrow cabin appeared ahead, framed by a broken fence and bare trees. Smoke curled from the chimney. Only a few more yards. Then her body gave out. She bent to ease the sack to the ground, but her left knee buckled without warning. She dropped silently, no cry, no moan. The flour bag tipped, splitting slightly at the seam. A soft plume of white spilled across the snow, indistinguishable from the ice around it. Nell tried to rise. Her hand slipped, her thigh shook, her ankle was done. She pressed her back to the fence, sliding down into the drift. Her face had lost all color, but it was not from the cold. "Mama?" Caleb's voice was a frightened thread. I just need a minute," she murmured. She didn't meet his eyes. He looked around. His breath formed uneven clouds. Then he saw a man through the window of the cabin, a tall figure bending over a saddle, working quietly. Caleb hesitated, then turned and ran. He tapped on the door with his little fist. Once, twice, 3 times. The door creaked open, revealing the man, rugged, broad-shouldered, maybe mid-30s, with wind-chapped skin and a dark beard. Caleb swallowed. "Sir, my mama can't walk anymore. Could you carry her inside?" The man did not speak right away. He looked past the boy to the woman curled in the snow. Then he stepped into the cold. Nell lifted her head as he approached. Her voice was barely above the wind. "I didn't faint, and I didn't fall. My leg just doesn't listen to me right now." The man crouched, nodded once, then carefully slipped one arm behind her back, the other beneath her knees. He lifted her, as if she weighed no more than that flour sack, now half buried in the snow. With one arm, he held her steady. With the other, he reached out, and Caleb took his hand. He said nothing, and together, the 3 of them crossed the threshold into warmth. Evening settles in. The cabin breathes with firelight. Elias carried Nell through the open door, the wind sighing shut behind him. Inside, the cabin welcomed them with the scent of wood smoke and iron. The warmth hit her like a wave, shocking, tender. He set her down gently on a chair near the hearth, her injured leg cradled with care. The fire crackled louder as Elias added more logs, building it to a full flame. Orange light danced along the floorboards, chasing off the cold. Caleb stood beside his mother, hand gripping her skirt as if afraid she might vanish again. Elias said nothing. He glanced once at the boy, then moved across the room. From a chest, he took out a thick wool blanket, folded it in half, and handed it to Nell without a word. Then, a battered tin mug of warm water, and another for Caleb. Nell's lips parted, perhaps to thank him, but the quiet in the room asked her to hold it. She accepted the blanket, wrapping it over Caleb's shoulders, then herself. The cabin was small and simple, pine walls, low ceiling, rough planked floor, but it was clean. Lined shelves held jars of dried herbs and beans, a rocking chair in the corner, a faded embroidery hoop on the wall, the thread halfway through a forgotten flower, a scarf neatly folded on the edge of the dresser, untouched by dust. It had once belonged to a woman. That was clear. Elias returned with a small basin and a kettle of steaming water. He glanced at Nell's feet. "You can't get the boot off?" he asked, voice like low gravel. She hesitated. "It's swollen." He nodded once. No judgment, no more questions. He knelt before her, resting the basin near her feet. Caleb moved as if to help, but Elias placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "You stay warm. I got this." Caleb obeyed, sliding to the sheepskin rug by the fire, tucking the blanket tighter around himself. Elias loosened the laces of her boot, his hands large but gentle. When she flinched, he slowed. His touch was deliberate, like someone used to working with things that could break. Nell watched him, watched how he didn't rush, watched how he filled the silence, not with words, but with presence. The boot came off with a soft tug. Her ankle was already swelling, red blooming through the skin. Elias did not comment. He dipped a cloth into the warm water, wrung it out, and placed it lightly against the bruised area. Nell winced. Elias looked up at her, holding her gaze for a long beat. "Just bruised, maybe a sprain," he said quietly. "You'll be all right." "Thank you," she said. He didn't reply. He stood, washed his hands, and turned back toward the fireplace. As he did, he caught sight of Caleb fidgeting with his sleeve, trying to hide a tear in the fabric. Elias reached for a small tin box from a nearby shelf. Inside were a needle, some black thread, and a pair of old buttons. He knelt beside the boy and motioned for his arm. Caleb hesitated, then offered the sleeve. Elias threaded the needle, clumsy at first, but determined. His thick fingers moved awkwardly, but he worked with care, pulling each stitch tight and slow. Caleb watched in silence. Then, softly, the boy whispered, "No one's fixed my clothes since Papa." Elias's hand paused in mid-stitch, his brows pulled together slightly. He did not speak. Instead, he tied off the thread, snipped it short, and laid the boy's arm gently back across his lap. Then, he reached up and ran his hand once, firmly, warmly, across Caleb's head, tousling his hair. A single gesture, nothing more. But Caleb leaned into it. And Nell, watching, said nothing, but her eyes stung for the first time that day. Morning arrived softly, like a secret kept between mountains. Nell woke to the warmth of a still-burning fire and the faint scent of pine smoke curling through the air. Caleb lay curled beside her, his small hand resting against her arm. A second blanket, one they had not brought, was tucked gently over both of them. Someone had thought of them in the night. She blinked against the soft light spilling in through the window. Outside, the snow had settled smooth over the ground, untouched. A silence not empty, but whole. Across the room, Elias sat by the window. He was sharpening a knife, slowly, rhythmically, as the light touched the angles of his face, etched with lines not from age, but from years lived too hard and too honestly. The rasp of steel on stone was the only sound for a long time. Nell's voice broke the stillness, low and clear. "I didn't mean to make it your burden." Elias did not turn from the window. "You didn't." Just that. No bitterness, no charity, as if it were a truth as natural as sunrise. She adjusted the blanket around Caleb and sat up straighter, wincing as her leg protested. "I didn't always make poor choices," she said after a pause. "But poor choices. They have a way of piling up when there's no one left to stop you." Still, Elias said nothing. She began to speak, not in a rush, but in slow, deliberate pieces, like laying down stones after carrying them too long. "My husband died in a mine shaft collapse. Nobody came for him for 2 days. By the time they dug through, he was gone. He wasn't the only one, but he was mine." Elias's hand stilled on the whetstone. "The owner blamed faulty maps. The sheriff blamed God." She took a shaky breath. "They took our house 3 weeks later, said we were squatting. I showed the deed. They said it was lost in the records." Nell's voice did not rise. It didn't need to. "After that, the people I thought were friends stopped looking me in the eye. Caleb got sick that winter. No doctor would come. I started walking because there was nothing else to do." Elias finally looked over. His eyes met hers, steady. "And now you're here," he said simply. Nell nodded. "Yes, now I'm here." Silence returned. But it was different now. Not distance, recognition. Her gaze wandered across the room, tracing the lines of the small cabin. It was spare, but not unlived in. And in the far corner, beneath a slanted shelf of books, sat a small wooden box. She tilted her head. There, tucked carefully beside it, was a carved horse no longer than her palm, a cloth rabbit, missing an eye but still upright, and a pair of tiny boots, scuffed but kept clean. "You had children?" she asked quietly. Elias's gaze drifted toward the corner. "One," he said. "A boy." She waited for more. None came. But the way he said it, low and final, told her everything. She didn't ask how or when. Some griefs don't need names to be real. Then, Caleb's small footsteps broke the silence. He shuffled into the room, rubbing his eyes with one hand. In the other, he held a scrap of paper, smudged with charcoal. "I found this in that box," he said, holding it up. It was a child's drawing. Rough lines, stick figures, a house with smoke curling from the roof. But the face drawn on the man, there was something tender there, something remembered. "Is this your son?" Caleb asked, offering it to Elias. Elias took the paper slowly, his fingers brushing the boy's. He looked at it for a long time, then nodded once. "Yes," he said, "that's him." Caleb nodded too, like it was something sacred. Nell watched Elias's face. There was no bitterness, no fury, just a quiet ache, worn smooth by time, and the deep stillness of someone who had learned to carry loss like a second skin. She lowered her eyes, not out of shame, but out of respect. And for the first time since the snow began to fall, she felt she had found somewhere she could breathe. The wind had softened, but the cold still clung to the windows like frost-bitten breath. Nell woke with a sharp jolt. Pain clawed its way up her leg, fierce and immediate, radiating from her ankle like fire trapped beneath skin. She swallowed hard, trying not to wake Caleb, who slept soundly beside her. Slowly, she shifted her weight, biting her lip. But even the slightest movement sent a shock of agony through her calf. She froze, breathing through her nose, eyes clenched tight. "Mama," Caleb whispered, stirring beside her. "Your leg's purple." She looked down. The swelling had grown overnight, dark and angry under the pale light of morning. Just then, the back door creaked open. Elias stepped inside, snow dusting his shoulders. He carried a bundle of firewood under one arm and a bunch of dried herbs in the other. He paused as he saw her, read the tightness in her face, the way her hands gripped the blanket. Without a word, he set the firewood down and crossed the room. "Let me see," he said quietly. Nell hesitated, pride flaring like a last defense. But when she met his eyes, steady, quiet, free of judgment, she exhaled. She nodded. Elias knelt beside her, gently lifting the blanket. With careful fingers, he rolled the hem of her dress to just above the knee. His hands were calloused but warm, movements precise, controlled. The bruise spread in deep shades of blue and violet from her ankle up the side of her calf. He pressed gently on the flesh, watching her reaction, speaking in a low, even tone. "Tendons strained, not torn. You'll walk again, just not today." Nell managed a wry smile. "Well, that's good news for the flour sack, at least." Elias didn't glance up. "I like to think I'm a little sturdier than a sack." That drew a huff of laughter from her, small, surprised. He stood, washed his hands, then moved about the room with a calm efficiency. A pot went on the stove, water boiling. He crushed the herbs in an old ceramic bowl, the scent of sage and pine filling the room. From a shelf, he pulled a torn shirt and began ripping it into strips. When he returned, he dipped the cloth in hot water, mixed the herbs into a thick paste, and applied it gently to her leg. Nell clenched her jaw, her eyes stinging. "Breathe," he said softly. "I've got you." His fingers were firm, anchoring. Not invasive, not cold, just there. When the bandage was in place, he rested one hand lightly on her knee. "That leg's got stories in it now," he murmured. "Might be worth something." He stood then, leaving her in a silence that felt fuller than words. Later, Elias prepared a meal. Nothing fancy. Cornbread, reheated dried meat, a soup made from foraged greens. Caleb insisted on helping. He took the tarnished spoons from the drawer one by one, wiping each carefully with the hem of his shirt before placing them on the table. When they sat down, Elias reached for his bowl without a word. Caleb glanced at him, hesitant. "Do we pray or something?" Elias paused, looked to Nell. She gave a small nod. So Elias bowed his head and said, "Thanks for the food. And the company." The room felt warmer after that. During the meal, Caleb giggled when Elias pretended to taste the soup, made a dramatic face, then added a pinch of salt with exaggerated precision. Nell laughed, not out of politeness, not forced, real, honest. The kind of laughter that hadn't touched her mouth in a long, long time. As the fire crackled and the bowls emptied, Caleb's eyelids began to droop. He slumped forward in his seat, cheek resting on the table. Elias rose, walked over, and lifted the boy in his arms, careful, gentle. He cradled Caleb like he was made of something precious, something remembered. Nell watched, her breath catching. "He hasn't laughed like that since his father died," she said softly. Elias didn't turn around, but his voice reached her, low and certain. "Then let's give him more days like this." The sky hung heavy with low clouds, the air still but tense, like a pause before a sentence too long held back. The sharp clatter of hooves on the frozen road broke the morning hush. A wagon creaked to a halt outside the cabin. Elias stepped out, rifle in one hand, only to lower it as he recognized the man on the seat. "Harlan Fitch," he said simply. The visitor jumped down, brushing snow from his coat. He was taller than Elias, stockier, with a quick, narrow gaze that scanned the surroundings. His arms were full, sacks of flour, a tin of coffee, dried beans. "Brought what you asked," Harlan said. Then his eyes landed on Nell, who had come to the door, Caleb clutching the edge of her skirt. He blinked. "Well," he muttered, "that's new." Nell nodded politely, then disappeared inside. Harlan leaned in toward Elias. "You sure about this? Folks might start talking." Elias did not flinch. "Let them." They unpacked the supplies in silence. But Harlan could not hold back long. As Elias reached for the last sack, he said quietly, "Heard talk in town. Wade Collier's offering money. A bounty." Elias stilled. "For who?" Harlan glanced at the cabin door. "Woman. And a kid. Descriptions match. Word is, she took something of his." Elias turned, walked inside without a word. Nell sat by the fire, hands folded in her lap. "Why would he put a price on you?" Elias asked, voice low. Nell looked up, eyes already full of the answer. "I took the deed," she said. "The one he forged to take our land. I meant to give it to the lawyer in Red Hollow. Never got the chance." Elias's jaw tightened. He paced once, twice, then stood still. "You should have told me. I did not mean to bring danger to your door," she said softly. "You didn't," he replied. "But it's here now." The silence that followed was not cold. It was the quiet of two people facing the truth, together, but not yet touching. Night came early. The wind howled like old memories at the corners of the cabin. Elias went out to fetch more wood. Nell, exhausted, dozed beside the fire, one hand draped across her lap, the other half curled near Caleb's empty blanket. The boy sat across the room, bundled in his own little cocoon of silence and wool, knees hugged to his chest. He had heard things. Things children always hear when adults think they whisper low enough. Elias returned with arms full of logs. He looked toward the fire, expecting Caleb to be curled against his mother. He was not. The boy was in the far corner, small and hunched, eyes glassy. Elias set the wood down quietly and walked over. He knelt beside him. "What are you doing over here, Bud?" Caleb did not lift his head. His voice came out small and thick. "I heard you. You don't want us here, do you?" The breath caught in Elias's throat. He reached out slowly, resting a warm, calloused hand on the boy's narrow shoulder. "No, son," he said. "I was just scared I couldn't protect you. But I will, I promise." Caleb looked up, eyes rimmed with red. "You promise for real?" Elias pulled the blanket tighter around the boy and gently drew him into a hug. "As real as it gets." They stayed that way for a long moment, the storm whispering at the windows, the fire cracking like a steady heart. From her chair, Nell opened her eyes, saw the two of them, and closed them again, not from weariness, but relief. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, something warmer held its ground. The snow did not fall that morning, but the sky was leaden with threat. Silence held the land tighter than frost. From the edge of a tree line near an abandoned homestead, a rider emerged, slow, deliberate. He wore a camel-hide coat, thick and weather-beaten, his hat brim pulled low. His horse stepped lightly, knowing this trail. The man paused outside the rotted fence of the empty cabin, scanning the horizon, then dismounted without a word. From higher ground, across the ridge, Harlan watched. He narrowed his eyes, then turned his horse and galloped downhill, boots thudding against stirrups. At Elias's cabin, Nell was sitting by the fire with Caleb when the door flung open. Harlan stepped in, breathless. "There's a man. Just rode up by the old McKinley place. Looks like he's waiting." Elias stood, calm, but something in his jaw set firm. "You recognize him?" Harlan asked. "No," Elias said, "but I know who it is." He moved to the wall, took down his rifle, and began cleaning it, slow, methodical, like a ritual long since memorized. Elias glanced at Nell. "Is it him, Wade Collier?" Nell did not look away. She nodded once. Yes. Her voice did not shake, but her hands were locked together so tight the knuckles had gone white. Elias stopped cleaning. You sure? I'd know the way he sits a horse, she said, then added quieter. I still dream about that stance. She swallowed hard. He owned the land. My husband worked under him. After the accident, Wade came around a lot more. Always with offers. When I said no, he stopped smiling. Nell looked up. The day we lost the farm, I told him I was going to the courts. I took the deed back, my name's still on it. He told me if I couldn't be bought, he'd burn it all instead. Elias's voice was low. He thinks he owns people. Nell crossed her arms. He thinks if he can't own something, he'll ruin it. A long silence. Elias finally said, I can send you east. Mining town past the ridge. If you ride through the night, you'll be there by morning. Nell's response came without pause. No. He raised an eyebrow. No more running, she said. I've done enough of that. He doesn't get to chase me out of another home. Elias nodded. Just once. Nothing more needed to be said. And, for the first time, they were not simply hiding together. They were standing together. Later, when the cabin grew quiet and the lamps flickered lower, Caleb stepped out from the back room. He must have heard. He always did. The boy looked between Elias and Nell, his blanket trailing behind him like a shadow. Without a word, he walked over and reached for Elias's hand. Elias knelt, eyes level with the boy's. Caleb asked nothing aloud, but his eyes, wide and searching, said it all. Elias pulled him gently into an embrace. You're safe here, he whispered, voice low and sure. With me, always. The snow had stopped, but the air held a silence that only comes before something breaks. Mid-morning light fell in silver lines across the clearing when the three riders appeared at the edge of the path. Wade Collier rode in the middle, tall in the saddle, his coat too fine for honest work, his face half hidden under the brim of a black hat. On either side of him, two hired men, lean and armed, scanned the woods like dogs off leash. They stopped a stone's throw from the cabin porch. Elias stood on the top step, rifle in his hands, not raised, but ready. His coat hung open, the morning breeze tugging at the edge. Calm didn't quite describe his stance. He looked carved from the same rock the mountains came from. Wade called out, voice oily and loud enough to echo through the clearing. I just want what belongs to me. From inside the cabin, a pause. Then Nell appeared at the doorway. She leaned hard on a makeshift crutch, a carved branch Elias had shaped for her the day before. But her spine was straight, her eyes locked on Wade like she was seeing the last ghost she ever meant to chase. You never owned me, Wade, she said, loud and clear. You don't now. Wade clicked his tongue, shifted in the saddle. That's not how the law sees it. You ran. You stole property, mine, and I've got reason enough to haul you back, dead or alive. Elias's voice was low and flat. You got papers to prove that? Wade held up a leather folder. Writ signed by the Collier estate. Says she's got debts unpaid. Elias didn't move. But from the tree line behind, a horse approached. Harlan trotted in, dismounted, and nodded toward the cabin. Sorry I'm late, he muttered. From behind him, another man rode forward, older, spectacles glinting in the sun, a satchel at his side. The lawyer. He dismounted slowly, then reached into his coat and unfolded a stamped document, holding it up with calm precision. This, the lawyer said, is a notarized claim for the land, registered 3 days ago in the name of Nell Hawthorne, including the deed she retrieved. With witness signatures, he turned toward Wade, and unless you have a superior claim filed through the district court, I'd suggest you stand down. Wade's jaw clenched. The folder in his hand shook just slightly. Bullshit, he snapped. You think I'll let some miner's widow and her mountain dog play house on my land?" Elias's tone dropped to steel. "She ain't playing." Wade's hand twitched toward his sidearm, but Elias moved first, faster than breath. The crack of the rifle shattered the cold morning. Wade's shoulder jerked back as the bullet struck. He howled, toppled from the saddle, and hit the ground with a thud. His gun clattered beside him, untouched. The two men with him bolted, spurring their horses in panic, leaving dust and broken pride behind them. Elias walked down the steps, slow and measured. He did not look at Wade writhing in the snow. "Next time," Elias said evenly, "it'll be center mass." Harlan approached Wade, towing his pistol away. "You want to press charges? I'm happy to be the witness you never asked for." Wade said nothing, just groaned, clutching his bleeding arm, the fight gone out of him. Back at the cabin, Nell pulled Caleb close. She had kept him inside, away from the door, but the sound of the gunshot had cut through everything. He trembled, eyes wide. Nell whispered, "It's over. He can't hurt us." But Caleb didn't respond. He just looked toward the door. Then it opened. Elias stepped in, rifle slung behind his shoulder now, calm returned to his face. He knelt down, held out a hand, steady and sure. Caleb hesitated, then stepped forward. Small fingers reached out and found Elias's hand. He gripped it, tight. "Pa?" the boy whispered. Elias blinked, but he didn't hesitate. He closed his hand around Caleb's and said softly, "Yeah, I'm here." The sun crested gently over the ridge, casting golden light on the thawing world. Snow melted in steady drops from the cabin's eaves, pattering softly onto the packed earth below. It was the first quiet morning in what felt like years. Nell sat on the front step, wrapped in a wool shawl, her injured leg bandaged neatly with clean white cloth. The pain had dulled, and with it, the fear that had long nestled in her chest seemed to loosen its grip. Her eyes followed the figures moving down by the corral. Laughter echoed across the clearing. Caleb was perched atop a small pony, Harlan walking beside him, steadying the reins. The boy's laughter rang clear and bright, dancing through the frosty air like a promise. Nell's lips curved into a smile, not the practiced kind she used when hiding sadness, but something deeper, freer. She rested a hand on her heart without thinking. Behind her, the cabin door creaked. Elias stepped out, carrying something small in his hand, an old handkerchief, carefully folded. He walked down the step, stopped beside her, and crouched without a word. He didn't kneel. There was no grand gesture. He simply unfolded the handkerchief and revealed a thin, worn silver ring, dulled by time, but whole. He took Nell's hand, turned it gently palm up. "You can stay as long as you want," he said, voice soft and steady. "Or forever." Nell didn't answer right away. Her fingers closed around the ring, as if it held more than just metal, memories, weight, the truth of being seen. She met his eyes and said, "I think I'm already home." He let out a breath, as if something inside him finally eased. A hawk called overhead as the morning stretched further. Life, quiet and resilient, moved around them. Nell stood, using her crutch, and watched as Caleb climbed down from the pony and ran toward the barn. Later that afternoon, Elias took Caleb by the hand and led him to the back of the barn. He opened a weathered trunk and lifted out a child-sized saddle, worn but sturdy. "This was mine when I was your age," he said, brushing off the dust. "Think you're ready for it?" Caleb's eyes widened. "Really?" Elias nodded. "We got a lot of work to do, partner." Caleb took the saddle with reverence, like it was a treasure. The sun dipped lower, casting warm amber across the valley. Nell leaned against the doorframe, watching them, her son, and the man who had once lived with ghosts but had opened the door for them both. As twilight fell, the three of them stood together on the cabin's porch. Elias's arm rested gently behind Nell's back. Caleb held the saddle in one hand and clutched Elias's shirt with the other. They looked out at the land, wild, open, and uncertain, but now it held the shape of something different. Not just survival, not just shelter, but belonging. And that, Nell thought, was enough. For now. For always. And so, under the vast western sky, a woman who had lost everything found something greater than a home. She found a reason to stay. A boy found laughter again. And a man who thought he was done with the world learned that some hearts were still worth opening. If this story stirred something in you, hope, warmth, or just the need to believe in second chances, then go ahead and hit that hype button. It means more than you think. And if you want more tales of love, grit, and quiet courage out on the frontier, subscribe to Wild West Love Stories. We've got more coming. Stories to make you believe again. Until next time, partner, keep the fire burning.